Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. For those familiar and new to the podcast, I'm Sarah, and thanks for joining me today. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Lola Ojabowale, the founder of Lunch Pail Labs, a digital product studio that helps clients build meaningful platforms and apps using no or low-code solutions. Lola guides us through what no-code platforms are, their uses and applications, as well as the skills online business owners need in order to make use of this technology. We take a look at the advantages and limitations of no-code and discuss the effects it is likely to have on the online business industry going forward. Lola also reveals how she found her calling to strike out on her own as an entrepreneur and the approach to risk-taking that would help anyone looking to start something new in their lives. We also get into the revolution of no-code and how the world can be an entirely different and better place in the near future. If you're hoping no-code could be a part of your next big idea, you won't want to miss out on this one. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. I am so excited to be joined by today's guest. We've got Lola Ojabowale on with us today. So Lola, how you doing today?
Today, pretty good. It is the second day of June, so yeah, rocking. Love the summer.
I love it. So tell me where you're joining me from in the world right now.
Yeah, so I am in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States.
Amazing. I think Atlanta, is it also called Hotlanta sometimes? Like, are we getting into that season now where it's just going to be like pretty brutal throughout the summer?
Yeah, so it does get pretty warm over here. I think we got some like 90 plus days. And some people, I feel like I call it Hotlanta more than everyone else, especially like the people who've like lived here for like decades and stuff. I'm always like, Hotlanta. And they're just like, oh, why are you doing that? Why are you saying that? but yes, I like to call it Hotlanta, and it does get quite hot and humid here in the summer.
Amazing. Well, I guess it's like you grow up with it. I kind of miss it. Now that I've been traveling for a couple years, I miss the hot Virginia summers. Okay, it's not Hotlanta hot, but I would say it's pretty hot. And now I'm a complete wimp. I've lost my heat resistance for some reason now, not living in the States. So I'm kind of jealous of you right now. Maybe you've got more resistance than I do at this point.
No, it's so interesting how just being in a different climate can change that. For a few years, I was in New Hampshire, which was super, super cold. And I've completely lost my cold resistance. Like under 60, I have my big jacket on. I'm buttoned up. I do not have any tolerance for that. But yes, to get accustomed to the heat.
That's awesome. Well, maybe I'll get back into some training and to handle it. I'm going back to the UK though here soon, so I got to go back into cold training.
Nice.
I'm all over the place. Digital nomad, we're just, all over. But in any case, I am super pumped to have you on. You are working in so many different cool areas. In specific, this is what we're going to get into today is the exciting world of no-code. And we've not had anyone on to talk about this, so this has been a much awaited interview. So thank you so much for coming on and joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. So for those who don't know you, let's walk through your entrepreneurial journey. How did you become involved with no-code platforms?
Absolutely. So kind of started during my first job out of college. So I'd say in school and in high school, pretty curious, would love to tinker. I ended up studying a mix of math and engineering. So always kind of have really liked to build. Post-college, I did something totally different that was not very related to building at all. Went to go work for an e-commerce company in Atlanta, doing strategy and operations, which was just a hodgepodge of all different things, managing warehouses, managing call centers, things like that. But during that time, a family member got really sick and really started to struggle with their diet. So I had this idea for my very first business idea, side hustle idea, which was a plant-based meal planner with a lot of cultural preferences so they could figure out what to eat. And through that process, originally I was like, hey, I'm going to learn how to code. I remember I was in this like iOS development program, and I went to this indie hackers meetup in Atlanta. And this person, KP, who does a ton of no code stuff, was there and was like, oh, you're going to be in this iOS development program for 2 years. Why don't you try some of this with no code, which was like the first I ever heard of it. Then from there, started getting into no code, built out that product. That sort of business side hustle didn't go anywhere, but from it, started learning a lot about no code and building for others.
Oh, that's awesome. And very cool that you went from kind of like a bunch of different industries and different projects to, I'm sure, landing in no code. It probably helps you today because from what I understand, no code's just such a nice tool and a nice base to create in a lot of different directions. I'd imagine that all these different areas you've worked in have probably opened your eyes to all these different ways you can use no code to kind of go back to those experiences and apply solutions.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really exciting things about like the no code and low code space now is just the diversity of backgrounds and industries that people come from. There are lawyers who are now able to build SaaS and mini products with no code, and they bring their law background, architects, teachers, all sorts of people. And so I think we're getting a lot of different solutions that have like that heavy influence that's not just tech.
Awesome. Well, see, and I'm getting too excited and I'll get ahead of myself here. So let's create some definitions because not everybody knows what no code or low code is. So what do those terms refer to?
Yeah, so no code is really just a process of creating software without having to code. For the most part, relies on platforms and things that are configurable. You have drag and drop widgets, but you're not actually interacting with any like lines of code, even though tons of code is being created. And those are platforms like Airtable. They're all different sort of no code, I guess almost like niches or slices, where it's whether it's no code for more like operations use cases, like tools like Zapier or Airtable, or for building web apps like Bubble, or for websites like Webflow. And then low code is this spectrum of solutions, tools, widgets that are all the way from completely no code where you're not adding any custom code to completely custom coded where you are. And so really, yeah, low code is just no code with a little bit of you can add code. And there are tons of platforms for that as well.
Very cool. No, I appreciate that. Just kind of clean definition because I know we're going to be talking a lot about that today. And there's probably somebody listening to this going, I have no idea.
Yeah.
What that is. So tell me, can people build complex enterprise level applications using no or low code? Or is it only viable for, say, small startups or smaller projects?
Yeah, another great question. And absolutely, it really depends on the tool. So there are some no code and low code tools that are specifically targeted to enterprise users. So they're going to be big on like having security controls and like access levels and some of the concerns that a large organization might have. And also on the other hand, lots of people can build with, especially on tech Twitter, a lot of the more popular no code use cases, or whenever people do see no code, it is that like maker, small startup, I'm trying to build my MVP. But now that it's kind of this generation of no code and low code has existed for a few years now, we're already seeing companies that have started as completely no code, maybe simple MVPs, and have even been able to scale and add additional functionality. I recently sort of shared a thread on a couple real businesses built with no code. And there are companies all the way to companies featured on Shark Tank that have gotten sort of like funding on there, to companies that have raised like hundreds of millions of dollars. Dividend Finance, for example, their core product is built on Bubble. And I think they've raised over $300 million for it. All to say, you can absolutely scale. And that's where I think a lot of the beauty of low code really comes in, because if a platform does enable you to import your own custom code, whatever limitation that the platform might have itself, you can overcome with a little bit of custom code. But instead of spending all of your time doing custom code, you only have to spend it on that unique piece of functionality almost like the 80-20 rule, the little piece that's actually really important to get right or differently.
Yeah. I mean, it's always so mind-blowing to me. I'd say an outsider to the no-code space, but I've been reading more and it tends to like pique my interest. And so I've been looking into it. And I do find it mind-blowing that, a company can get 300 million in funding and be, low code, or here's another solution I might be using every day only to find out it's a no-code solution that someone built. And that to me is like, it feels like an aha moment of going, oh, let's say me personally, I always feel like I'm on the outside of, let's say the development space. I am not a coder. And so I just assume, oh gosh, it's not in my reach. But then there's so many people now able to do so much via these platforms that I don't know, it could be me, it could be anyone who comes up with these solutions and a solution that scales and becomes this incredible business. Like that feels like a turning point, maybe a little bit of a revolution, but again, I'm an outsider. I could be completely making things up here.
I'm there with you. Like, I absolutely agree that it does feel in some ways like a turning point. I look at like myself, and a couple years ago, I was like, man, like I wish I had the skills to like make these ideas that I have kind of come into fruition. And even if we think about with like software, if you were a non-technical person, the products that you needed to build to have like a sufficient ROI, like if you weren't technical, it would make no sense to build something with software that might only return a couple $100,000 per year, because that would just be the salary of whoever you needed to hire to build it for you. So I think no code enables a lot of different opportunities. I think it makes more solutions make financial sense. Like we're seeing even more of these like micro SaaS companies pop up with super, super niche, hyper targeted products and solutions for customers. And I think everybody wins in that situation.
Yeah, I love it. I'm excited to see where this is going. And like you said, it's kind of like it just enables people to go, a couple years ago, I didn't think that I could create the solution. And here it is. I'm doing it now. Other people are doing it. I can't wait to see what goes on in the future. But in any case, let's talk about the people who, let's say they're interested and they want to get into the space. What skills or requirements does an average person need to build a no-code platform of their own?
So yeah, to build like on a no code tool, it's really going to vary the tool that they decide to. Some will have higher kind of learning investments than others. There are a couple of resources and communities. 100 Days of No Code is one. The No Code Cheat, which I can send you the link of that as well, is one that kind of ranks tools by their difficulty. But depending on, so the short answer is it definitely depends. You'll have some, if you want to build a website, there are some tools that you're not even going to have to really learn anything to build with the tool. They're as intuitive as like building a PowerPoint or a Google slide. And then there's some more complex platforms, Bubble, Builder, Webflow, where a lot of the design and web principles that you get with code, you'll actually want to understand things like Flexbox, things like how to design a database and data structures. And for those, there are actually, it's kind of funny, starting to be like no code bootcamps, no code coaches, no code classes that can guide you on the way if you want to use some of the more advanced platforms.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. When you say no code bootcamp, I'm so curious. I'm like, what would that look like?
Yeah. It's so wild. I feel like in some ways, some parts of like the no code space are almost like replicating like things that just like exist in code. But yeah, you got no code boot camps, no code schools. Some universities are now offering classes with like no code that I've had the pleasure of like hearing people being involved in. So yeah, it's wild.
Very cool. Yeah, it makes me wonder if, I don't know, my university is doing things like that. Maybe they are. But these is things like I love to see that start to seep in, especially at the university level where, you're basically giving the tools to the next generation to start building those things sooner rather than sort of stumbling into it later. So it's awesome. I did want to talk a little bit, I guess, back on your journey into no code. I understand that you have, launched your own business in the no code space. So tell me a little bit more about Lunch Pail Labs and how you assist entrepreneurs using no code solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lunch Pail Labs, I like to describe it as a digital product studio for businesses. So, and at Lunch Pail Labs, I actually do a mix of no code, but mostly low code and custom code is kind of like the tech stack iteration. But companies come to Lunch Pail Labs when they want to build a product, and we kind of take the whole product process. So, yes, the build is part of it, but also the scoping, the defining product requirements. We take that, some of the design, and the ongoing support and iteration, which I think is like the most fun, because even when you first launch, you always learn something new in the hands of customers. So we're like ongoing product partners, and clients work with us to help them kind of like manage kind of like auxiliary products to their core offerings. So.
Yeah, well, talk to me a little bit more about that. Like when you're saying that you're with them through iterations and updates, like what does that look like? How do you take no code solution and still work with it, you scale it and customize it further over time?
Yeah, we basically work in monthly engagements, and in the support and iteration, oftentimes we'll even get close to our customers. So not only looking into sort of the usage data, where are people having some friction on like the product, but also looking into some of the customer requests, even sometimes handling those requests and feedback and kind of like requests for improvement from our customers, and then ongoingly kind of helping them manage their product roadmap and iterating on the product. If we see that, oh, something could be fixed with like a dashboard or like a hub that we need to add to like a particular product, working on that and implementing that on behalf of our clients. Or if like we find that a lot of the customers are actually wanting to import data from that would be enabled by a new integration, doing things like that as well. So we're almost like an extension of their team until they don't really need Lunch Pail Labs anymore.
So it sounds like, it really gets into the nitty gritty. You have that foundation and base, and then it's still kind of, you're building solutions on top of the solutions over time.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's also the kind of cool thing with no code and low code. I think as it gets more popular, like the build piece will actually become much less important. And there are so many other parts of like a product that need to happen to make it successful. Are you solving the right problem? Like, do your customers experience friction? What is the design like? How is the user experience? So I think it's great that no code and low code exists to help you push those solutions quickly. But yeah, like having time, I think teams that leverage no code, low code, they have a lot of time to focus on the other very, very important and necessary parts of like making a product.
That's interesting. I like that perspective. I never really thought about it, the time that you get back to get creative on other solutions. Because, I think my perception is when you're having to code from scratch, it's time consuming, it's resource intensive, and all of a sudden you're really focused in on one area, but might not be building in 4 other areas that you need. And so, yeah, I find that to be a really interesting perspective. But of course, we're obviously fans of this. I do have to ask if there's ever a flip side. What are their limitations or downsides to building a no code or low code platform over a fully coded one?
Yeah. So again, absolutely. It really depends on the solution. I think what has been great about no code and low code is there are really, really, really great. I think they work best for ideas where the engineering problem is relatively well understood. So if you're building a marketplace, there's tons of marketplaces. People know what a marketplace looks like and how to build a marketplace. So there's not really a lot of benefit of re-engineering and trying to figure out how to build a marketplace. Now for some kind of like bleeding edge projects or products or spaces, deep tech. Yes, there's some like AI tools, but like really, really hard tech or like AR, augmented reality, virtual reality experiences, some Internet of Things type things where the engineering problem is not yet really well understood. I think those are going to be harder to try to make with like a no code or a low code platform. I don't think people are going to create completely new like technical innovations. With no code, low code, they might solve problems in different ways by applying kind of like an existing type of tech solution. So that's a big one. And though some teams have scaled, again, depending on the tool, a lot of tools don't really play well multiplayer. So yeah, some of the no code tools, you wouldn't be able to just plug them into an engineering organization like of the size of Google, for example, and just say, hey, yep, everybody, let's go. And everybody's just going to build on this no code app. Like there's not yet the support for that kind of like interactivity amongst multiple people. So yeah, I would say like those are definitely the downsides. And depending on, again, the tool that you start with, some tools are more customizable than others. You will run into problems when you scale. One thing that has been interesting to see at Lunch Pail Labs is people who go to the kind of the iteration of they start with a really, really easy tool that you don't need any kind of like additional help with. It's very intuitive. You can just build whatever you want to build in 5 minutes. They run into a limitation that actually can't be solved or with custom code because custom code isn't enabled in that platform. And so they go to a more advanced no code tool, and then they go to like a more advanced no code tool and kind of rebuild in that way. So there are currently only a handful of tools that I think can support really the vast majority of use cases like code can.
It's interesting when you say that, like when you're talking about kind of scaling up to more complex platforms. And this is me showing that I'm completely from the outside of creating these tools. But is it possible to kind of move your solution from one platform up and up to the next? Like, is that easy or?
All situations, it's mostly going to be like a rebuild. Like there's some times where maybe you'll get like an integration with a platform. There are some no-code tools that are built on top of Figma, for example. So like technically, if you have your solution built on Figma, like you could report Figma to some other thing. But for the most part, and this even goes if you're transitioning from no-code to completely custom code, say for a few low-code platforms that let you export your code, you're going to be rebuilding from scratch. So there is that effort. The cool thing, though, is if you get to a point where there is, even if you use like the easiest no code tool that doesn't require like any external knowledge, even if you get to a point where, oh man, I need to rebuild this on another platform, you're not going to be in a situation where you're wasting effort. Like it's going to be because, oh, you actually have like the demand or the need or the customer pull to try to scale up. So kind of negatives, yes, you do have to spend the time rebuilding, but when you do get to a point where it's necessary to rebuild, it's because you've proven that it's necessary. So you're not like wasting your time upfront.
Well, yeah, and I want to bring up what you said before because you were talking about, okay, and there's going to be some use case scenarios where you can't like, say, have multiplayers kind of in the back end or whatever it was, but you said not yet. And I think there's an emphasis on we don't have it yet, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen at some point as things mature, as more people gravitate towards this. So I think it's totally fair, everything you're saying. This is a time and place where we are now, and these might be the limitations for the future, but they may not be the limitations for always. So there's still a lot of really exciting potential there, which is one thing I did want to talk to you about is like the potential and what you're seeing, because, we've talked about a lot of exciting things during this interview, but I was wondering, is there one thing in particular you're seeing in the moment in the no-code development space that's just really standing out to you, really excites you?
Yeah, actually really interesting. It's almost like a merging. So you have these no-code, low-code platforms rapidly iterating, getting more functionality by the day, by the year. What you said is absolutely true. Like whenever I talked to someone who was using like Bubble, for example, in 2013, they were like, all the stuff I can do now with no code was just like not possible before. So rapidly like iterating. It's very cool to see, I guess, more coded companies, GitHubs, your Replets, companies that are more so targeted to developers, almost in a way adopt some of their own no code, low code. So one thing that I'm actually really excited about. So GitHub recently launched Copilot. It is a like almost AI engine. I've used it before too, where it will auto-complete your code. It kind of pulls all of the code from all of, I guess, GitHub. And depending on what you start typing, it knows how to autocomplete. Replit yesterday actually just announced a similar feature. So I think we'll see I think the AI piece of no code, being able to generate your own no code, not even through learning a platform, because we're almost in this like halfway point where, I mean, you still got to go to a boot camp, really. Well, you don't have to go to a boot camp, but it might take several months for you to get really good at like a platform like Bubble. But I think not too far away, yeah, not too much time, we'll actually be able to like generate some of these things with like words. Yeah, like AI will be able to generate our products for us, which will make all the other things more important. When you can just spin up a marketplace and tell it the colors and things, and you don't even have to interact with anything at all.
That's exciting. No, it's really cool stuff. I mean, we were already seeing a huge impact in and around the online business industry of the way AI is coming in, and whether it's e-commerce or for content creation. I mean, it's almost like dizzying to be able to keep up with. So it's cool to see the way that's kind of coming in. And even in no code, which, feels like its own separate entity, it's like there's a merging there, and there's going to be an even closer bond in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to ask, and this is actually almost came from somebody on my team. They heard that you were going to be on the podcast. They said, okay, make sure to ask her what no code communities she likes. And so I want to know what your favorite ones are, because this is from somebody who's like super into no code, but they were a little lost. They were kind of like, well, I go to this community, that community, but it sometimes know if I'm in the right places. So for those wondering out there, where are the right places to be hanging out?
Ooh, yes. Okay. So yeah, the biggest one I'll probably have to shout out is 100 Days of No Code with Max Haining. It is probably like the best way to get your feet wet with no code. It is not only is it a Twitter challenge where like every day you like build something with no code, it's also a community. I think they have like a boot camp and cohort now. So that's a really, really great one to be a part of. No Code Founders is also another really great community, has like thousands of people who are building products with no code. So nice place to find support. And then I think On Deck is probably one of the very few programs for no code. I actually did that last year, but they have On Deck no code. And they also started this thing called No Code Foundations, which is kind of like a precursor to On Deck. But again, lots of founders who are building with no code, even agency owners who are building with no code. I think it's a great community to join if you want to start being in no code services. And yeah, those would be my top three: No Code Founders, 100 Days of No Code, and On Deck No Code.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Thank you. We'll try to link to those communities in the show notes so that people can find them. And who knows, maybe we'll get a little cross comparison between maybe my team's notes and your notes and figure out, okay, where are all the communities that we could be linking to and for this episode. So thank you.
I love it. Yes.
I did want to ask like a couple personal questions. You've been so awesome talking to me all through this no code stuff. But I think one of the most exciting things about having you on, besides getting all into the no code space, is just learning about your journey and to build your own business. I was curious, you mentioned all these different industries and jobs that you had done, companies you'd worked before. You went and struck out on your own to build Lunch Pail Labs. What was the catalyst that inspired you to build your own business versus, say, continuing to build for other people?
Yeah, another really great question. I think for me, so I mentioned that like my first kind of business idea was to help like a sick family member, like dad, when he got really sick with cancer. It just really honestly like just shifted my perspective on like what is important, what do I even like doing, what is worthwhile. I think career-wise, I was in a space where I felt not very challenged, not very engaged. It was kind of like a ho-hum meh. And I was listening, I don't remember the podcast episode, but one podcast with someone who had also recently made the jump. And he just asked these two questions like, one, are you going to stay in whatever you're doing forever? If the answer is no, and the answer for me was like absolutely no, then if not now, then when? And so I kept on asking myself, if not now, then when? And it got to the point where I didn't have like a great answer to why I was continuing to do what I was doing. So I think the desire to like kind of just, own my time, self-actualize. We only have so much limited time on this earth anyway, so might as well do something that's kind of interesting have been the biggest catalyst.
When you were asking yourself, if not now, then when, like you seemed pretty set on going, okay, I want to do my own thing. I want to be in the no code space. Or were you still spending some of that time going, okay, I know if not now, then when, but also what? I think a lot of people feel that pull, but then they're like, oh my God, but what though? What is the thing? So I don't know how you found that thing or if that was like a clean or, or winding journey for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So actually, yeah, I mean, no code actually just sort of happened when so I left my full-time job to go full-time on myself in February of 2020. So right before all of the coronavirus stuff.
Ooh.
So it was cosmic timing. I was like, oh, really? This is when I decide to be like, oh, yes, let's follow what we want to do. But ended up working out. And when I first left, I wasn't even planning on doing like no code for others. It really just sort of happened. I was actually in an incubator for like my plant-based meal planner. So I was pretty gung-ho on like, this is what I was going to do. But to answer your question, it was probably like a year plus, a year and a half, honestly, of me asking myself, if not now, then when? And also thinking of different what's. Like I was thinking maybe another job would feel good and I would try sort of like put my feelers out there and get an offer, but that just like didn't sit with it. For a while, I thought I was going to go to grad school, but I think just after some just real reflection on like, what do I most want? Like, what do I most want my days to look like? Like, what would be like an ideal day for me? Those all revolved around creating my own products and working for myself. So long journey, but lots of introspection that helped me kind of get there.
I think it's so useful to have you talk about this and talk about what that timeline looked like, what questions you were asking. Because I think this podcast, we have loads of entrepreneurs come on to the show from all sorts of different industries, but we don't always get that like, but how did you land on this successful thing or find your thing? Like I understand you used to do X and now you're doing Y, but it's just nice to have somebody go, this is what my winding journey looks like to get there. And I think it would certainly kind of put other people at ease who are trying to figure out the same thing. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely windy. Like, I think, yeah, if I went back to 2020 Lola and be like, oh, whoa, this is what your days are going to look like, or this is the business that actually makes you money, she'd be like, wow, that wasn't really the plan, but okay. So.
I love it. Well, it's so cool to even hear with the timeline. We had a couple people who were on the podcast who had started their ventures right before the pandemic. And it's always so interesting to hear them come on and be like, right, so then the pandemic hit and then I was on my own and then I really had to commit to this thing, but like, it's okay. Here I am now successful and it works. So I'm glad to hear that you're like in that same cohort. No one could have anticipated what the pandemic would have looked like or being an entrepreneur in the pandemic, but
yeah.
you are.
Yeah, it's just like definitely wild.
I'm totally stealing from someone else's podcast here. Somebody had asked you on another podcast about your approach to risk, and I loved your answer. So now I'm being a terrible podcast host by not giving them credit because I didn't see who it was that asked you that, but at least wanted to ask you because I think you've got a really beautiful approach. So tell me, how do you approach risk and kind of taking on new adventures?
Yeah, really, really great question. So I lean into this thing called asymmetric bets. And if you're not familiar, an asymmetric bet is any sort of, I guess in like finances, it's like a trade or investment, and where the potential upside is so much greater than the potential downside. So whenever there is like an opportunity to take an asymmetric bet, I lean into that because I think it's very easy to just like, or at least for me, to let just over fear take over, especially when I was at my full-time job, like, oh man, I'm going to quit my job at some point. I'm really going to quit my job to like do my own thing. The asymmetric bet would be like, hey, like at the potential upside is that it really, really works. And I make more than my day job and I love my life and things are awesome. And then like the potential downside is like, oh, well, I'll have to look for another job. And it doesn't work. So contrast that with like the potential upside and downside of staying at a job that I don't like or a life that is just like not fulfilling. Upside, I don't know, maybe it gets a little bit more fulfilling or I tolerate it. And then downside, I get fired or something and I have to look for another job. So I think it's easy to lean. I think it's especially helpful when looking at what might be traditionally the quote unquote safe options. Because, yeah, when you kind of compare them to like, but what could go right if you took this risk? It makes the other choice so much more sensical, I think, and obvious.
I love that. I'd never heard of asymmetric bets prior to seeing that notes from your other interview. And I'm trying to be a better person here. I think where I pulled it from was your interview with Shout Out Atlanta, which we could link to in the show notes if anyone wants to listen to that other interview. What I love about it is just like the way that you laid it out. I think we so very seldomly ask ourselves, what if everything went right? And I think after I read that note from your interview, I had to sit with myself and there was like a decision that I was making. And I was like, okay, I just wrote it down. What happens if everything went right? And that's not an exercise I had ever done before. And I was shocked by the outcome. And I went, oh, wait a minute. There's a lot more here than I realized. And why have I never tried to like look for best case scenarios before? We're always so attuned for what the worst case scenarios could be. And then we just never try or strike out because we can't even see the good and the potential. So I love that you are kind of operating in that headspace, and it just brings so much more clarity to your decisions in a way that I think it's not easy to do. Once you sit down and do it, it's quite rewarding, but it's like, why wasn't I tuned into this before?
That's so real. And yeah, I also took it from, I think Eric Torenberg talks about it in some article about like switching careers and even, yeah, the risk of starting like a company and stuff. And yeah, I feel like there's just so many more benefits. And even as I was thinking about it, like there were levels too. It's like, the best possible scenario, like I do this thing, it works out super well. I'm super rich. I love my life. But even there were like middle scenarios that were just so massively better than my current situation. I learned how to build products. I become like a product person because I was more interested in like product management and things than like strategy and operations at an e-commerce company anyway. And I use that to transition to a different job. So like, I think if you, lean into like some of the potential of, hey, these could go right. And like, my worst case scenario in both situations would probably like be the very similar thing. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I love that. I think even like you said, going for, all right, what's the middle ground? Oh, I walk away with new skills I wanted. Okay, great. Why not give that a go? I really think that's fantastic and super timely. I don't know, maybe if it's just relevant to my life or I'm surrounded by people at the moment. Everyone seems to be making a lot of decisions, and anyone who's willing to listen to me, I've been telling them about that mindset, what happens when it could go right, or the asymmetric bets, which I learned from you. So thank you. Hopefully we've got a good ripple effect going on.
Yes, more asymmetric bets. I love it.
Yeah. I did want to talk to you about your passion for economic equity. I want to talk about what that is, what that looks like, and in your viewpoint, how would economic equity play out in the tech industry, for example?
Yeah, I think NoCode is actually a really big part of this. And I teased some of it earlier, but in addition to kind of working on my own thing, for the past couple of years, I've been really, really involved in like Atlanta's tech ecosystem. I've gotten the chance to, participate in accelerators and help out with accelerators, oftentimes with a lot of other diverse entrepreneurs like myself. And I think so often I see how like often entrepreneurs get told no, especially like as a non-technical founder, oh, you can't build this because it's not venture scale. And even when they have like wonderful solutions that could have real meaningful impact to people's lives. So the thing that I think is really interesting and cool about no code and low code is this permissionlessness that it enables. You don't actually have to have anybody co-sign whatever solution you want to build and create and monetize in the market. Like you can do that. Like even as a non-technical founder, you don't have to have anybody's say so or permission. And I think like with that, we'll be able to have more folks building things that are actually authentic to themselves, that empower themselves, and that can lead to even great financial outcomes, like this micro SaaS thing that has been growing. I feel like maybe like in the Twitterverse, but it seems like there are more micro SaaSes around, these companies that are making 5 to 10K per month, building really hyper targeted solutions for customers. Yeah, I think there's just like, it's just another layer of potential like economic opportunity for folks without having to have the permission of, oh, you went to this school, so you can only do this if you go to this school, or you can only do this if you have this investor, or this kind of engineer. So
I love it. And it's all so beautifully said. And I think that was a thing I felt like I could see a little bit of that potential as the outsider. Obviously, you're much more deeper into it than I am, but the way that you spelled it out it gives me a lot of hope. I would say that I feel that way for the online business space. That's why I've always gravitated or really liked joining this space, stumbling into this space, I think is more appropriate, but felt like it was the more accessible version of business because you can run your online business from any country. You don't need loads of money to start up, whether it's an affiliate site or sometimes even an e-com site. All of a sudden you've got I interviewed one mother who ran her FBA businesses from her car while she was breastfeeding, or
I love it.
Another woman who bought a business at age 50 and then moved to Thailand. And it was like a YouTube channel, like the ability to kind of get into business without the permission, like you mentioned, that permissionlessness is so amazing. And I cannot wait to see what happens. And thanks to NoCode, or hopefully, online business continues to be expansive and have a lot of people in. So I don't know. It's exciting. I think to lean back on what we were saying before, a little bit of a revolution in different areas, but like hopefully with similar outcomes.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And like one thing, like I almost think of it as like the Legoization of business is happening right now. Like you mentioned, give it like 30 or 40 years ago, there was no way that you could have like an audience of hundreds of thousands of people watching a video that you made online without having to create the distribution channels and pay maybe like a lot of money to get onto TV. There's so much. I think we are living in this day and age where there's so much opportunity for reach. A lot of times because all of these other businesses have enabled it for everyone else. No code, low code is just one of the ways that now that sort of like Legoizes business. But yeah, I think there's so much opportunity here. And I think we'll just, have more people self-actualizing, building things that are important to them, that have real solutions, and not having to have any gatekeepers telling them that they can't, or it's not important, or no. So
absolutely. No, it beautifully said. I love that perspective. And, you're obviously a part of that. You took the leap. You are creating solutions. You've got your own beautiful business running and growing. And it's so exciting to sort of look at you and your journey as a microcosm of everything that's playing out in the space. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing so much with us today, from your personal journey to all this juicy info on NoCode. I think this is going to be a super helpful episode for our audience.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure to talk about it.
Thank you. So I like to close these out with just a couple rapid fire questions. That's our tradition. If you're cool with that, I can kick the first one off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So what would you say are the best hidden growth opportunities within the no-code space?
I think like there's this whole like engineering is marketing side, like building products as marketing thing that's happening that more people should take advantage of in the no-code space.
I like that. That's a good one. Okay, so what tools or resources can help people build no-code or low-code products?
So there's a website, NoCode Family, that's probably the most like well-organized directory of, I feel like it has almost every no-code app and use case. So you can look at that and kind of, if you want to know which tool to use, definitely check that out. There's also this like cheat sheet by KP, who is like a build in public and no-code person. And that's also very thorough. Definitely one to check out as well. And MakerPad. MakerPad is another like really, really, really great resource about like all things no code, has a ton of tutorials. I think they even have like a entry cohort. So yes, that's another great one.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll try to link to those as well for folks. And finally, what's been your funniest moment working within the no code space?
Yeah. So I think you can get a lot of sometimes like developer heat from like the no code from people who like primarily code. So it's always really interesting talking to folks about, or like, I feel like oftentimes I'll find myself on Twitter, somebody would be like, I don't believe in no code. No code's not real, or you can't build anything real with no code. And so it's always cool to like share those examples, whether it's like clones of very popular companies Reddit, TikTok, Twitter, or like I mentioned, like companies that like raise ton of money and are massively revenue generating as examples of like, yes, you can actually do real things with no code.
I love it when haters get online
Yeah.
and just hate on things that you're like, yeah, okay.
It's like, don't hate, appreciate. Like there's space for everybody.
That is too funny. Well, it's so cool to see the real solutions. Again, I think we're headed in a direction where there's a lot more possibility out there, despite what any haters on Twitter say. So just we're going to keep moving on. Moving on, creating the good stuff. Well, thank you so much, Lola. This has been a ton of fun. I can't wait to see what people think about this one. So just curious, if people want to reach out to you or figure out where you are hanging out, where do they find you?
Yes. So at Ojabowale Lola on Twitter, I have open DMs. Definitely feel free to send me a DM. Also, my website is lunchpaillabs.com. So if you have any questions about all things no code, low code, I always, always, always love jamming with people on that. So yeah, those are the two best places.
Awesome. Well, good. I'm excited to see how this one plays out. Definitely going to, be following you and seeing what you get up to in the future. And yeah, just thanks so much for sharing this with our audience today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I hope you've walked away with a bit of new insight that'll help you in your digital entrepreneurship journey. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating review. To learn more about businesses available for sale at Empire Flippers, click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.